What if the person you trusted most, the one holding your hand while you brought new life into the world, uttered words that shattered your reality? For one woman, in the raw, agonizing moments of childbirth, her husband's casual dismissal, "She's just being emotional," became a chilling premonition. He thought he was calming a hysterical wife. He had no idea he was speaking to a titan of industry in the making. The very next day, while he was picking out a "World's Best Dad" mug, her face was on the cover of Forbes. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how a single, callous comment ignited a revolution in one woman's life and exposed the staggering secrets hidden within her marriage. The birthing suite at St. Jude's Medical Center was a study in beige indifference. The walls, the color of weak tea, seemed to absorb the frantic energy that pulsed within them. For Isabella Martinez, the world had shrunk to the rhythmic peaks and valleys of her contractions, each one a wave threatening to pull her under. Her husband, David Chen, sat perched on the edge of a visitor's chair, his tailored suit a stark contrast to her sweat-dampened hospital gown. He looked less like a supportive partner and more like a man waiting for a delayed flight. Can you just breathe with me?" Isabella gasped, her knuckles white as she gripped the bed rail. "Like we practiced?" David looked up from his phone, a flicker of annoyance crossing his handsome features. "I am, honey. I'm right here." He took a perfunctory deep breath, the sound barely audible over the beeping of the fetal heart monitor. "No, you're not," she ground out, another contraction seizing her. "You're checking your emails. I can see the blue light on your face." "It's an important deal, Izzy," he said, his voice laced with a familiar note of condescension. "The market in Singapore is opening and I need to be on top of it. You know how crucial this quarter is for my promotion." Isabella squeezed her eyes shut, a tear of frustration and pain leaking from the corner. It wasn't just the physical agony of labor, it was the gnawing loneliness of it. For months, she had felt like a supporting character in the grand narrative of David's career. His late nights at the office, his networking dinners, his constant talk of targets and projections. It had all created a chasm between them. She had hoped the birth of their first child would bridge that gap, would be the one thing that was unequivocally theirs. "David, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I need you. Right now. Just for a little while." He sighed, a long-suffering sound that made her stomach clench tighter than any contraction. He pocketed his phone and moved to her bedside, taking her hand in his. His touch was cool and distant. "Okay, I'm here. See, just try to relax. Just try to. The doctor said it could still be hours." But Isabella couldn't relax. The pain was a living thing clawing at her from the inside. With each surge, a primal scream built in her throat. She tried to hold it back, remembering the calm, serene births she had seen in online videos. But this was not serene. This was brutal. "It hurts so much," she whimpered, her body trembling. "I don't think I can do this." David patted her hand awkwardly. "You're being a little dramatic. Don't you think women have been doing this for centuries? My mother had 3 kids, and she never made this much of a fuss." The words, meant to be placating, landed like a slap. "Dramatic," she whispered, her voice dangerously low. "Well, yeah," he said, oblivious to the storm gathering in her eyes. "You're getting all worked up. It's not good for the baby. The nurse said to stay calm." The nurse, a kind older woman named Brenda, chose that moment to enter the room. She took in the scene. Isabella's tear-streaked face, David's stiff posture, with a practiced eye. "How are we doing, sweetie?" Brenda asked, her voice a warm balm. He thinks I'm being dramatic," Isabella said, her voice trembling with a mixture of pain and fury. Brenda shot David a look that could curdle milk. "Well, then he's never seen a woman in transition. You're doing amazing, Isabella. Your body is working hard." She then turned to David. "And you, sir, your only job right now is to be her rock. Tell her she's a warrior. Tell her she's the strongest person you know, because right now she is." David had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I'm sorry, Izzy. I don't know what to do." "Just be here," she pleaded. "Just be present." For a while he was. He held her hand, wiped her brow, and murmured encouraging words that sounded like they were lifted from a script. But as the hours dragged on, his attention began to wander again. His phone would reappear in his hand, his gaze drifting to the television in the corner of the room, which was tuned to a 24-hour news channel. The final stage of labor was a blur of excruciating pain and disorienting commands. "Push, Isabella, push," the doctor urged. She bore down with all her might, a guttural cry tearing from her lips. She was exhausted, emotionally flayed, and felt utterly alone. In a moment of reprieve, she looked at David, searching for a lifeline in his eyes. He was looking at her, but his expression was not one of awe or concern. It was pity. And then he said it, the words that would echo in her mind for years to come. He leaned over to the doctor, a conspiratorial whisper that she was clearly meant to overhear. "She's always been a bit emotional, tends to overreact." The doctor, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Dr. Anya Sharma, didn't even grace him with a response. Her focus was entirely on Isabella. But Isabella heard. The words cut through the haze of pain, sharp and precise. It wasn't just a dismissal of her current agony. It was a judgment on her entire being. Every time she had cried over a sad movie, every time she had been passionate in an argument, every time she had expressed a deep-seated fear or a soaring hope, it was all being filed away under the label of emotional. In that moment, something inside her shifted. A cold, hard resolve began to form in the crucible of her pain. She would show him. She would show them all. With a final ferocious push, she brought her daughter into the world. The baby's cry filled the room, a raw, powerful sound that silenced everything else. They laid the tiny, wriggling creature on her chest, and Isabella was consumed by a love so fierce it stole her breath. She looked at her daughter, so small and yet so full of life, and made a silent promise. She would never let anyone make her feel small again. David, now all smiles, and relieved cheer, leaned in to kiss her. "You did it, Izzy. She's beautiful." Isabella turned her head away. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. He recoiled, his smile faltering. What's wrong?" She looked at him, then her eyes clear and steady. "You'll see," she said. And in that moment, he had no idea just how true those words would be. He was looking at his wife, the mother of his child, but he was also looking at a stranger, a woman he had fundamentally misunderstood, a woman who was about to turn his world upside down. The day after their daughter, whom Isabella unilaterally named Hope, was born, the hospital room was a revolving door of well-wishers. David's parents, the Chens, arrived with an ostentatious balloon bouquet and a barrage of unsolicited advice. Isabella's own mother, a quiet, gentle woman, brought a hand-knitted blanket and a thermos of chicken soup. David was in his element, the proud new father, accepting congratulations and regaling everyone with a sanitized, heroic version of the birth story. He conveniently left out his emotional comment and his preoccupation with the Singaporean market. Isabella played her part, smiling weakly and accepting the coos and compliments directed at Hope. But inside she felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching a movie of her own life. The cold resolve that had taken root in the delivery room had not thawed. If anything, it had solidified into a quiet determination. That afternoon, while Hope slept in her bassinet and David was down in the cafeteria charming the nurses, Isabella's best friend, Chloe, arrived. Chloe was a whirlwind of energy and brightly colored scarves, a successful graphic designer who had been Isabella's confidant since college. "Oh, honey, you look like you just pushed a human out of your body," Chloe said, enveloping her in a gentle hug. "But a beautiful, glowing warrior goddess version of that." Isabella managed a genuine smile for the first time that day. "Thanks, Chloe. I needed that." "I brought you the essentials," Chloe said, unpacking a bag filled with gourmet chocolates, a trashy celebrity magazine, and a bottle of expensive champagne. "The champagne is for when you get home, obviously, or for now, I don't judge." Isabella laughed, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. "Maybe later. I'm still a bit wobbly." "So," Chloe said, settling into the visitor's chair and lowering her voice, "how's Captain Corporate? Did he manage to put his phone down for more than 5 minutes?" Isabella's smile faded. "Barely. He told the doctor I was being too emotional while I was in the middle of a contraction." Chloe's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in fury. "He did not. Oh, I will end him. I will use my design skills to create a PowerPoint presentation detailing his every flaw and email it to his entire company." "Save your energy," Isabella said, a strange new confidence in her voice. "I have a better idea." Before Chloe could ask what she meant, David bustled back into the room, holding a copy of a financial newspaper. "You will not believe this, Izzy," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "The Harrison deal went through. My numbers are going to be through the roof this quarter. That promotion is in the bag." He brandished the paper like a trophy. "That's great, honey," Isabella said, her tone flat. He didn't notice. His attention was already on the television, which was tuned to a business news channel. A breaking news banner flashed across the bottom of the screen. "Tech world stunned by Aura, mysterious new AI platform that secures $500 million in Series A funding." David scoffed. Another one of these overnight success stories. Probably just some kid in a garage who got lucky. The news anchor continued, her voice filled with professional excitement. "The founder of Aura, who has remained anonymous until now, has been revealed, and it's a name no one in Silicon Valley saw coming." On the screen, a photograph appeared. It was a professionally shot headshot, one Isabella had taken a few months ago for a project she had told David was for a freelance design portfolio. She looked powerful, her expression serene but determined. Beneath the photo in bold letters was her name, Isabella Martinez. The camera then panned to a magazine cover. It was the latest issue of Forbes, and there she was again in the same power pose under the headline, "The Unseen Force, Isabella Martinez, the woman behind the revolutionary AI Aura and her $1.5 billion valuation." The room fell silent. The only sound was the gentle sucking noise Hope was making in her sleep. Chloe's jaw was on the floor. She slowly turned to Isabella, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning admiration. You are Aura." Isabella simply nodded, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. David stood frozen, the newspaper slipping from his grasp and fluttering to the floor. He stared at the television screen, then at his wife, then back at the screen. His face, which had been so full of self-congratulation, glee just moments before, was now a mask of utter bewilderment. What is this?" he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the TV. "This has to be a mistake. A joke." "It's not a joke, David," Isabella said, her voice as calm and clear as a bell. "It's my company." "Your company?" He squeaked, his voice an octave higher than usual. "What company? You design websites for dentists." "I did," she corrected him gently, "in my spare time, for the past 2 years while you were working late and going on business trips. I was building Aura." She went on to explain, her voice steady and sure, how she had identified a gap in the market for a more intuitive, human-centric AI for creative professionals. How she had taught herself to code late at night after David had fallen asleep. How she had secretly assembled a small, brilliant team of female engineers who, like her, had been underestimated and overlooked by the tech industry. How she had bootstrapped the company with her freelance earnings, and then using a male pseudonym, Alex Chen, to avoid the inherent bias of the venture capital world, had pitched her idea to investors. "Alex Chen." David repeated, his voice hollow. "You used my name, a version of it," she said. "I thought it was fitting." The news anchor was now interviewing a tech analyst who was gushing about Aura's potential. "This is a game changer," the analyst said. "The platform is light years ahead of anything else on the market, and the fact that it was created by a woman of color no less, who has been completely outside the Silicon Valley echo chamber. It's a story for the ages. Isabella Martinez isn't just the future of AI. She's the future of business." David sank into the visitor's chair, his face pale. He looked at his wife, truly looked at her for the first time in years. He wasn't seeing the emotional woman he had so casually dismissed. He was seeing a stranger, a brilliant, powerful, and utterly self-possessed stranger who had built a billion-dollar company from their spare bedroom. And he, the man who was so proud of his potential promotion, suddenly felt very, very small. The chasm between them had not been bridged by the birth of their daughter. It had been revealed for what it was, a vast, gaping canyon, and he was on the wrong side of it. The revelation of Isabella's secret life as a tech mogul sent shockwaves not just through the business world, but through the sterile beige hospital room that had become the unlikely epicenter of their domestic drama. For the next few hours, Isabella's phone, which she had kept on silent, buzzed incessantly. Emails, texts, and social media notifications poured in a digital tsunami of congratulations, interview requests, and investment offers. Chloe, now fully recovered from her shock, had gleefully taken on the role of temporary gatekeeper, fielding calls and marveling at the names that flashed across the screen. "Mark Cuban's assistant just called," she whispered to Isabella at one point, her eyes like saucers. "And I think I just hung up on Sheryl Sandberg." David, in stark contrast, was a study in stunned silence. He had retreated to a corner of the room, his face a pallid mask of confusion and what looked suspiciously like fear. He kept glancing at Isabella, then at the sleeping baby, as if trying to reconcile the two wildly different versions of the woman he thought he knew. The doting new mother in the hospital gown, and the ruthless CEO on the cover of Forbes. How could they be the same person? His own world, which had seemed so solid and impressive just that morning, now felt flimsy and insignificant. His hard-won deal, his imminent promotion. They were like children's toys compared to the era she had built in secret. That evening, after the last of the visitors had departed and a fragile quiet had settled over the room, The tension between them was a palpable thing. Isabella was breastfeeding hope, her expression serene, as she gazed at her daughter. David, unable to bear the silence any longer, finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me, Izzy?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why did you hide all of this from me?" Isabella looked up, her eyes unreadable. "Would you have believed me?" she asked softly. "Or would you have told me I was being emotional, that I was overreacting?" The words, a direct echo of his own callous dismissal, hit their mark. David flinched as if struck. "That's not fair," he mumbled. "Isn't it?" She countered, her voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel. "For the past 5 years, David, my dreams have been a footnote to yours. My ambitions were something to be managed, to be fitted in around your schedule. When I wanted to take a course in advanced coding, you said we couldn't afford it, that my freelance work was just a hobby. The week after, you bought a new set of golf clubs for your networking with clients." She adjusted the baby in her arms, her movements fluid and confident. "I learned very quickly that if I wanted to achieve anything, I had to do it on my own. So I did." David ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time that day. I had no idea you felt that way. I always supported you." "You supported the version of me that you were comfortable with," she said, "the one who made your favorite dinner, who listened to you complain about your boss, who organized our social life. You didn't want a partner, David. You wanted a support system, an unpaid intern for your life." The raw, unvarnished truth of her words hung in the air between them. David opened his mouth to protest, to defend himself, but no words came. Because deep down he knew she was right. He had taken her for granted, had relegated her to the background of his own ambition. He was about to apologize, to beg for a chance to understand, when a nurse knocked on the door and entered with a small official-looking envelope. "A courier just delivered this for you, Mr. Chen," she said, handing it to him. David took it, a puzzled frown on his face. It wasn't from his office. The return address was a prestigious law firm in the city center. With trembling fingers he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a formal notice, a letter of termination. "What is it?" Isabella asked, noticing the color drain from his face. He read the letter aloud, his voice a strangled croak. "Dear Mr. Chen, this letter is to inform you that your employment with Sterling and Finch is terminated effective immediately. This decision is based on a gross violation of the company's code of conduct, specifically Clause 12.b regarding insider trading and corporate espionage." He looked up at Isabella, his eyes wide with panic. "Insider trading, corporate espionage. This is insane. It's a mistake. Is it?" "David." Isabella's voice was quiet, but it cut through his panic like a surgeon's scalpel. "Of course it is," he insisted, his voice rising in desperation. "I would never, I don't even know how." "Let me jog your memory," she said, her gaze unwavering. "A few months ago, you came home very excited about a new client, a tech startup called Innovatech. You said they were developing a revolutionary new AI platform." David's face went white. "How? How did you know about that?" "Because Innovatech was my primary competitor," Isabella said calmly. "And I have it on very good authority that you accessed their confidential data room using your senior credentials at Sterling and Finch, and then you sold that information to their biggest rival." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. David stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He had been so careful, had used encrypted channels, had covered his tracks meticulously. How could she possibly know? The Harrison deal. She continued, piecing it all together for him. The deal you were so proud of this morning, the one that was supposed to get you your promotion. It was with the company that bought Innovatech's stolen data, the data you provided. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. His big win was built on a foundation of lies and deceit. And somehow his wife, the woman he thought was designing websites for dentists, knew all about it. But how? He whispered, the fight draining out of him. You're not the only one with connections, David. Isabella said, a hint of a sad smile on her lips. Aura isn't just a platform for creatives. It's also one of the most sophisticated data analysis tools in the world. It can find patterns and connections that no human could ever see. It took Aura less than a second to trace the data breach at Innovatech back to an IP address. Your IP address, at your office. She had known. For weeks, she had known about his betrayal. She had watched him celebrate his success, knowing it was all a sham. She had let him walk right into the trap he had set for himself. The irony was staggering. He had dismissed her as too emotional, while he was the one engaging in criminal activity, driven by a desperate ego-fueled need to get ahead. He had accused her of being dramatic, while his own life was a carefully constructed house of cards about to come crashing down. He looked at his wife, truly seeing her for the first time. The quiet, unassuming woman he had married was gone. In her place was a formidable opponent, a queen in a high-stakes chess game he didn't even know he was playing, and he had just been checkmated. He sank to his knees, the letter of termination crumpling in his fist. He had not only lost his job and his reputation, he had lost his wife. And he had no one to blame but himself. The woman he had underestimated had not just surpassed him, she had exposed him. The drama in the delivery room was just the opening act. The real story was just beginning. The days that followed were a surreal blur of jarring contrasts. While Isabella's star ascended at a meteoric rate, David's world imploded with brutal efficiency. The news of his termination for corporate espionage, coupled with the bombshell revelation of his wife's identity, became a salacious B story in the business journals. He was a modern-day Icarus, flying too close to a sun he didn't even know existed. His name, once a mark of rising success at Sterling and Finch, was now whispered in tones of pity and scorn. He checked out of the hospital suite with Isabella and Hope, a ghost of the man who had checked in. The drive home was silent, the air in their luxury sedan thick with unspoken accusations and the quiet hum of $1 billion valuation. Their beautiful minimalist home, once a symbol of their shared success, now felt like her territory. The sleek furniture, the curated art, the panoramic city views, it all seemed to belong to her, to the formidable CEO of Aura, not to the emotional wife he had married. Isabella, meanwhile, was navigating the treacherous waters of her newfound fame with a preternatural calm. She set up a temporary command center in their home office, the same room where she had secretly built her empire. Chloe, who had quit her job with a flourish of triumphant emails, was now her de facto chief of staff, managing a relentless schedule of calls with lawyers, investors, and public relations firms. "The New York Times wants a feature," Chloe would announce, sticking her head into the nursery, where Isabella was changing Hope's diaper. "And Anderson Cooper's people are online, too. They want you for a primetime special." Isabella would simply nod her focus on the tiny human in front of her. "Tell them my daughter's nap schedule is non-negotiable." This juxtaposition was not lost on David. He would watch from the doorway as she seamlessly transitioned from a tender, cooing mother to a sharp, decisive executive negotiating the terms of a multi-million-dollar partnership with a Japanese tech giant while gently rocking Hope's bassinet with her foot. He saw a strength and a multifaceted brilliance in her that he had been completely blind to. He had seen her only through the narrow lens of his own needs and expectations. His days were a bleak landscape of shame and inactivity. He spent hours aimlessly scrolling through the news on his tablet, each article about Isabella's genius and Aura's disruptive technology, a fresh stab to his wounded pride. His former colleagues, the ones who had clapped him on the back and called him a rainmaker, now crossed the street to avoid him. The networking buddies he had played golf with were suddenly unavailable for a drink. He was a pariah, and the loneliness was crushing. In a desperate attempt to feel useful, he tried to take over the domestic duties. He made coffee, which was too weak. He attempted to cook dinner and nearly set off the smoke alarm. He offered to watch Hope, but his fumbling, uncertain movements only made the baby cry, and Isabella would have to swoop in and expertly soothe her. He was as incompetent at home as he now was in his professional life. One evening, about a week after they had returned from the hospital, David found Isabella in the nursery, softly singing a lullaby to Hope. He stood in the doorway, a silent, pathetic figure. "I'm sorry, Izzy," he said the words, feeling woefully inadequate. "For everything. For what I said in the hospital, for the other thing." Isabella didn't turn around. "Which other thing are you referring to, David?" she asked, her voice soft but pointed. "The insider trading or the years of casual neglect?" He flinched. "Both. All of it. I was a fool. I was so wrapped up in my own ambition I couldn't see you. I didn't see you." "No, you didn't," she agreed, finally turning to face him. Hope was asleep on her shoulder, her tiny face a picture of pure innocence. "You saw what you wanted to see. A pretty, agreeable wife who would make your life comfortable while you pursued your important career." "I can change," he pleaded, taking a tentative step into the room. "Let me show you. I'll support you. I'll be a stay-at-home dad. I'll be your unpaid intern. Whatever you want." A sad smile touched Isabella's lips. "It's not that simple, David. This isn't about you taking on a new role in my life. It's about the fact that the entire foundation of our marriage was a lie. You didn't respect me. And trust, once that's gone, it's almost impossible to get back." Her words were not angry, but they were devastatingly final. He felt a chasm opening up between them, far wider than the one he had perceived before. Just then, Isabella's phone, which she had left on the changing table, began to buzz. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. Isabella sighed and answered it. "What is it, Chloe? I'm putting the baby down." Chloe's voice on the other end was frantic. "You need to see this. Turn on the news. Any channel." Isabella's brow furrowed in concern. She picked up the baby monitor and walked into the living room, David trailing behind her like a lost puppy. She flicked on the large-screen TV. A news anchor was reporting live, a graphic of a man's face displayed prominently next to her. The man was handsome, with a charismatic smile and piercing blue eyes. The name beneath the picture was Liam O'Connell. "Breaking news in the tech world tonight," the anchor said. "Liam O'Connell, the disgraced founder of Innovatech, the company at the center of the recent corporate espionage scandal, has just released a statement. O'Connell, who was once Isabella Martinez's mentor, and according to sources, her former fiancé, is claiming that he is the true architect of the Aura platform. He alleges that Martinez stole his intellectual property after their acrimonious breakup 5 years ago." The camera cut to a pre-recorded video of Liam looking earnest and wronged. "Aura was my brainchild," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Isabella was my protégé. I trusted her, and she betrayed me. She took my work, my dream, and passed it off as her own. I have the proof. I have the original code, and I will fight to get my company back." David stared at the screen, a new wave of shock washing over him. Former fiancé, mentor. This was a part of Isabella's past he knew absolutely nothing about. He turned to look at his wife. Her face, which had been so composed and in control, was now ashen. Her hand, which held the remote, was trembling slightly. The formidable CEO, the unshakable titan of industry, looked for the first time vulnerable. The man on the screen, Liam O'Connell, was not just a rival. He was a ghost from her past, a ghost David never knew existed, and he had just declared war. The battle for Aura was no longer just about business. It was deeply, dangerously personal. And David, the disgraced husband, was caught in the crossfire, a powerless spectator to a drama that had started long before he had ever entered the picture. The accusation from Liam O'Connell landed like a grenade in the already chaotic landscape of Isabella's new life. The media, which had been celebrating her as a feminist icon and a business visionary, now pivoted with dizzying speed. The narrative shifted from a story of female empowerment to a salacious tale of love betrayal and stolen genius. "Tech's new queen, or a cunning thief," blared one headline. "The battle of the exes who really created Aura," screamed another. Liam, a master of public relations, played his part to perfection. He gave tearful interviews, painting himself as the brilliant, trusting mentor, whose heart and life's work had been stolen by a manipulative femme fatale. He produced reams of evidence, early-stage code snippets, concept documents, and emails from 5 years prior that, taken out of context, seemed to support his claim. He was charismatic, believable, and he had a story the media couldn't resist. Aura's investors grew nervous. The company's valuation, which had been soaring, began to wobble. The board of directors, who had been singing Isabella's praises, now called for emergency meetings, their voices laced with concern. The fairy tale was over. Now the witch hunt had begun. Inside the minimalist fortress of their home, the atmosphere grew even more strained. Isabella became a woman possessed. She worked around the clock. Her days a frantic blur of legal consultations, board meetings, and strategy sessions with her PR team. She barely ate, and the soft maternal glow she'd had in the days after Hope's birth was replaced by a hard, brittle exhaustion. David watched her, his feelings a tangled mess of guilt, awe, and a strange, newfound protectiveness. He saw the toll Liam's accusations were taking on her, and for the first time, his concern was not for himself, but for her. He remembered the name Liam O'Connell from snippets of conversation early in their relationship. Isabella had mentioned him once or twice, vaguely referring to him as a former boss from her first job in tech. She had never mentioned they were engaged. The omission now felt like a gaping wound, a testament to the secrets they had both kept. One night, David found her in the Home Office at 3 a.m., surrounded by stacks of legal documents, her face illuminated by the cold light of her laptop screen. Her shoulders were slumped, and for a moment she looked utterly defeated. "You should sleep," he said softly from the doorway. She jumped, startled. "I can't. They're filing an injunction tomorrow. They want to freeze all of Aura's assets." He walked into the room, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he didn't feel like an intruder. He pulled up a chair and sat opposite her. "Talk to me, Izzy," he said. "Tell me about him. Tell me the truth." Isabella stared at him, her eyes searching his for a long moment. Then she let out a long, shuddering breath and began to speak. "Liam was my first real boss," she began, her voice low. I was young, just out of college, full of ideas. He was brilliant, charismatic, the golden boy of the local tech scene. He took me under his wing. We started working on a project together, an early concept for an intuitive AI. It was collaborative. My ideas, his coding expertise. She paused, a shadow passing over her face. He was also incredibly charming. He made me feel like I was the center of the universe. We fell in love. We got engaged. I thought he was my future. What happened? David asked gently. The closer we got to a viable product, the more he changed, she said. He started taking credit for my ideas in meetings. He would present my concepts as his own. When I confronted him, he would laugh it off, tell me I was being sensitive. He'd say, "We're a team, baby. What's yours is mine." But it never seemed to work the other way around. The word sensitive hung in the air, a bitter echo of David's own words in the delivery room. He felt a fresh wave of shame. The final straw, Isabella continued, was when he pitched our project to a major VC firm. He put his name on the patent application as the sole inventor. My name was nowhere on it. When I found out, I was devastated. I told him it was over. He didn't take it well. He threatened to ruin me to make sure I never worked in the tech industry again. He said he would paint me as an unstable, emotional woman who couldn't handle the pressure. She looked at David, her eyes blazing with a long-suppressed anger. So I disappeared. I left the tech world. I started my own small freelance business, and I met you. I never wanted to look back. I buried that part of my life because I was ashamed. I let him make me feel small. And Aura? David asked. Aura is all mine, she said with fierce pride. It's built on a completely different framework. The core concept of a human-centric AI might be similar, but the architecture, the code, the entire execution is mine. The snippets he's showing the media, they're from our old project. They're a dead end. They're worthless. But he's banking on the fact that no one will dig deep enough to see that. He's not trying to win in a court of law. He's trying to win in the court of public opinion. He wants to destroy my reputation, just like he promised he would. David listened, horrified and enlightened. He finally understood the depth of her past trauma, the reason for her secrecy. It wasn't about deceiving him. It was about protecting herself. And he, with his own casual dismissiveness, had unwittingly become a part of the pattern of men who had underestimated and belittled her. A new resolve hardened within him. He was not a tech genius. He was not a PR expert. He was a disgraced former executive with a tarnished reputation. But he still had a brain. And he knew the world he came from. The cutthroat, ego-driven world of corporate finance. A world not so different from Liam's. He's a bully, is he? David said, his voice firm. And I know how to deal with bullies. They have weaknesses. They're arrogant. They make mistakes. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. You're fighting him on your turf. Technology and the law. You need to fight him on his. Public perception. Corporate warfare. For the first time since the news broke, Isabella looked at him not as a failed husband, but as a potential ally. What are you suggesting? I still have a few contacts, David said, a glimmer of his old confidence returning. People who owe me favors. People who hate Liam O'Connell more than you do. He burned a lot of bridges on his way up. Let me make some calls. Let me dig. You focus on the legal battle. Let me handle the back channels. Isabella hesitated for a moment. Could she trust? Asked him. Could she rely on the man who had so recently betrayed her? But as she looked at him, she saw a different man. She saw the man who had been humbled, the man who was finally seeing her for who she was. and she saw a flicker of the sharp, strategic mind that had, however, misguidedly gotten him to the top of his own field. "Okay," she said, giving him a single decisive nod. "Let's see what you can do." It was a fragile truce, a temporary alliance born of desperation. But in the dead of night in the war room of her besieged company, it was a start. David, the disgraced husband, had just been given a chance to redeem himself. And as he picked up his phone, he knew he wasn't just fighting for her company. He was fighting for his marriage, for his family, and for the last tattered remnants of his own honor. The battle for Aura had just gained a new, unexpected soldier. While Isabella and her legal team prepared for an all-out war in the courtroom, David launched a covert operation from the confines of their home. He transformed from a moping unemployed husband into a man on a mission. He worked his phone like a weapon, calling in old markers, leveraging long-forgotten connections, and piecing together a mosaic of Liam O'Connell's less-than-stellar history. He discovered a pattern of behavior, a string of former partners and junior employees, mostly women, who had left Liam's companies under mysterious circumstances, many with non-disclosure agreements and quiet settlements. His key informant was a disgruntled former CFO of Innovatech, a man named Marcus Thorne, whom Liam had unceremoniously fired a year prior. Thorne, bitter and eager for revenge, was a treasure trove of information. "Liam's a narcissist," Thorne told David over an encrypted call. "He's brilliant, I'll give him that. But he's a black hole of credit. He sucks it all in, and no light escapes. He leaves a trail of bodies behind him. Check out a woman named Dr. Alana Finch. She was his lead researcher before Isabella. She left the country after working with him. Last I heard, she was teaching at a university in New Zealand." That was the lead David needed. He spent 2 days trying to track her down, finally finding an email address for a Dr. Alana Finch at the University of Auckland. He drafted a careful, respectful email explaining the situation and appealing to her sense of justice. He didn't know if she would reply, but it was a shot in the dark he had to take. Meanwhile, the pressure on Isabella was immense. Liam's injunction was granted temporarily, freezing Aura's operational accounts. The move was a strategic blow designed to cripple the company and sow panic among its employees and investors. The media circus was relentless. Liam was everywhere, the charming, wronged victim, while Isabella was portrayed as the cold, calculating ice queen. The climax arrived during a live, televised town hall event hosted by a major news network. It was billed as a debate, a chance for both sides to present their case to the public. Isabella, against the advice of her lawyers, had agreed to participate. "I'm not going to hide," she had told them. "I'm not going to let him control the narrative." The stage was set. Isabella sat on one side, poised and steely. Liam sat on the other, his expression a carefully calibrated mix of sadness and resolve. The moderator began, and for the first 30 minutes Liam was winning. He spoke eloquently of his vision, of his passion for the project, and of his devastation at being betrayed. He presented his cherry-picked evidence with the flair of a seasoned showman. Isabella's responses were technical, precise, and factual. She spoke of code architecture and development timelines. But in the arena of public opinion, facts were a poor match for a compelling emotional story. The live audience polls showed a clear swing in Liam's favor. David watched from the green room, his heart pounding. He had been feeding information to Isabella's PR team, but Liam was a formidable opponent. Just as he was starting to lose hope, his phone buzzed. It was an email. The sender was Alana Finch. The email was short, but it was explosive. "Mr. Chen," it read, "I will not be silenced any longer. Liam O'Connell is a fraud. He did to me exactly what he is doing to your wife. I am boarding a flight to Los Angeles now. I have a recording, and I have the original time-stamped server logs from our project. He didn't just steal my work. He tried to pass it off as his own to secure his first round of funding. I am sending the recording to you now." Attached was an audio file. David's hands trembled as he downloaded it. He quickly forwarded the email and the file to the lead producer of the town hall, a woman he had managed to connect with earlier, with a simple, urgent message: "You need to see this. A surprise witness is on her way. Play the tape." Back on stage, the moderator was moving in for the kill. "Ms. Martinez," she said, her tone sympathetic but firm, "Mr. O'Connell has presented a compelling case. He has emails, documents. What do you have other than your word?" Isabella opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the moderator held up a hand. "We have just received some breaking information in this case. A new piece of evidence has just been submitted." A confused murmur went through the audience. Liam's confident smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "We have an audio recording," the moderator announced. "Mr. O'Connell, perhaps you can shed some light on it." And then a voice filled the studio. It was Liam's voice, but it was not the calm, measured tone he had been using all evening. It was a voice from 5 years ago, dripping with venom and rage. "You think you can challenge me?" Liam's recorded voice sneered. The audio quality was slightly muffled, but the words were crystal clear. "You're nothing without me, Alana. You're just an emotional, hysterical woman. I will bury you. I will take your work. I'll put my name on it, and I will make sure everyone in this industry knows you're unstable. Who are they going to believe? Me, the golden boy? Or you, the hysterical woman who couldn't take the pressure?" The silence in the studio was absolute. Every eye was on Liam. The color had drained from his face. The charismatic mask had shattered, revealing the ugly, snarling bully underneath. It was the exact same pattern of abuse, the same dismissive, misogynistic language he had used with Alana and that Isabella had described. The moderator's voice was icy. "Mr. O'Connell. That was your voice, was it not? And the woman you were speaking to? That was Dr. Alana Finch, your former lead researcher, was it not?" Liam was speechless. He looked like a cornered animal. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Isabella looked directly at him, her expression not triumphant, but filled with a cold, righteous anger. "This is his pattern," she said, her voice ringing with clarity and power. "He finds talented women, exploits their work, and when they stand up for themselves, he tries to destroy them by calling them emotional or unstable. He didn't just steal from me. He has a history of it. The only difference is, this time he picked the wrong woman." The audience, which had been so sympathetic to Liam just moments before, erupted in a wave of applause. The spell was broken. The truth in all its ugly detail was out. In the green room, David watched, tears welling in his eyes. He had done it. He had given her the ammunition she needed. He had helped her win. On stage, Isabella Martinez was no longer on the defensive. She was in complete command. She had not only saved her company, she had exposed a predator and given a voice to his other victims. She was not just the CEO of Aura. She was a symbol of something far more powerful. She was a woman who had been underestimated, dismissed and betrayed, and had risen from the ashes stronger and more brilliant than ever before. The queen had not been dethroned. She had just solidified her reign. The fallout from the town hall was immediate and spectacular. Liam O'Connell's career imploded overnight. His investors pulled out his board, resigned, and he became a pariah in the industry he had once dominated. Dr. Alana Finch, who arrived mid-scandal to a throng of reporters, became an overnight hero, and her testimony, along with the server logs she provided, sealed Liam's fate. The injunction on Aura's assets was lifted, and the lawsuit was dropped. The story of Liam's downfall and Isabella's triumph became a legend in the tech world, a cautionary tale about the perils of hubris and the power of truth. Aura's valuation skyrocketed, surpassing even the most optimistic projections. Isabella, now free from the cloud of suspicion, was hailed not just as a genius, but as a courageous leader who had faced down a powerful bully and won. She used her newfound platform to launch a foundation dedicated to supporting women in STEM, ensuring that others would not have to face the same barriers she had. But amidst the public victory, a private reckoning was still to come. Isabella and David returned home from the town hall in silence. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a quiet, contemplative exhaustion in its wake. The war was over, but the landscape of their marriage was still a battlefield. They put a sleeping hope to bed, their movements around each other, careful and deliberate. Then they sat opposite each other in the living room, the city lights twinkling below them. "Thank you," Isabella said, her voice soft but sincere. "I couldn't have done it without you. You saved me." David shook his head. "You saved yourself, Izzy. I opened a door. You were the one who had the courage to walk through it." He looked down at his hands. "I know this doesn't change anything. Not really. What I did, how I treated you, it's still there." "No, it doesn't erase it," she agreed. "But it does show me something. It shows me that you're capable of seeing me, truly seeing me. And it shows me that you're willing to fight for me, not just for yourself." She looked at him, her gaze clear and searching. "The man I married, the one who checked his emails while I was in labor, the one who dismissed my pain. I don't know if I can ever get back to him. I don't think I want to." David's heart sank. "I understand. But," she continued, a flicker of something new in her eyes, "the man who worked tirelessly to find Alana Finch, the man who used his skills to defend my honor, the man who put his own ego aside to help me, that's a man I could get to know. That's a man I could, potentially, build a new future with." It wasn't a promise of forgiveness. It wasn't a guarantee of reconciliation. But it was a possibility, a fragile, tentative opening. "Our old marriage is over, David," she said, the finality of it hanging in the air. It was built on a flawed foundation, on secrets and disrespect. If we're going to have any chance, we have to tear it all down and start again. From scratch, with honesty, with respect, and with a clear understanding of who we both are. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling city below. "I am the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I am a mother. I am a woman who will never again allow herself to be made small. Can you love that woman? Can you be a true partner to her?" David stood up and walked to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. He looked at her reflection in the glass, the powerful, brilliant and complex woman who was his wife, the woman he had almost lost. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion, but steady with a newfound certainty. "I can, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you'll let me." Isabella didn't reply immediately. She just continued to stare out at the city lights, a city of infinite possibilities. The future was unwritten. The trust was not yet rebuilt. The healing was far from complete. But for the first time since the cold, sterile moments of the delivery room, there was a glimmer of something that had been absent for far too long. There was hope. A new architecture for their lives was waiting to be designed, and this time they would build it together, brick by honest brick. So what do you think? Was David's betrayal unforgivable, or does his fight for redemption earn him a second chance? The story of Isabella and David is a raw look at what happens when the person you love most fails to see who you truly are. It's a reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges are not in the boardroom, but in our own homes. If this story of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimate triumph resonated with you, if it made you question, cheer, or even cry, then please give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Let us know in the comments below, Team Isabella or Team Second Chance. We can't wait to hear from you.
Rich millionaire tries to hide affair at restaurant, but pregnant wife finds him with mistress. In the hushed ambience of the exclusive Le Serene restaurant, where celebrities hobnob with the world's wealthiest elite, a single table in the far corner glowed under a discreet halo of light. Patrons whispered while peering curiously at Julian Rothwell, a billionaire rumored to be the next Warren Buffett of the tech world. His presence exuded mystery until that night. Few had glimpsed him in public with anyone but his elegant, pregnant wife, Serena, yet on this particular evening he was not seated with his wife. A striking, unknown woman leaned toward him, her eyes bright with secrets that threatened to explode. Julian Rothwell was a man who existed in the nexus of power and scandal. Born into a wealthy family, he grew his inheritance into an empire that sprawled across tech startups, real estate ventures, and philanthropic endeavors. By the age of 35, the media had already dubbed him the next big thing in global finance. His father, Henry Rothwell, famously socialized with the likes of Richard Branson and Elon Musk at exclusive retreats in Davos, Switzerland. Julian followed suit by rubbing elbows with titans, such as Bill Gates at philanthropic galas, forging connections that catapulted his business forward in quantum leaps. Despite his staggering net worth, Julian always maintained a carefully polished public image. He was known not just for his money, but for his seemingly solid moral compass. Well-spoken and charming, he donated millions to children's hospitals, including the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and Boston Children's Hospital. Reporters found it easy to paint him as a philanthropic playboy with a heart of gold. Whenever asked about family, his warm grin and casual mention of "my wonderful wife Serena" seemed to confirm that behind the vast empire was a loving husband ready to become a father. Serena Delacroix Rothwell, an heir to an old French wine dynasty, was a picture of refinement. She was half French, half American, and fully mesmerizing. A petite woman with dough-brown eyes and a natural grace, she had captured Julian's heart during a chance meeting in Paris. The tabloids breathlessly covered their fairy tale wedding at a centuries-old chateau in the Loire Valley, featuring photos of the bride's gown by a leading Parisian designer. In all those pictures, Julian looked like he was worshipping the ground she walked on. Now, nearly 2 years into their marriage, Serena was 7 months pregnant, radiating that glow that mothers carry. Yet with each passing day, she felt Julian slip away inch by inch. It was more than just the typical burdens of a high-profile job. Julian was often absent, claiming urgent business across continents, from a new tech startup in Silicon Valley to a budding real estate project in Tokyo. And whenever she confronted him about the complexity of being left behind, he offered carefully packaged explanations delivered with a well-practiced charm. Still, the seeds of doubt had already been planted in Serena's heart. She saw the shift in Julian's mannerisms, something intangible and yet so obvious to a wife who recognized every tilt of his head and nuance of his speech. The phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, or the endless text messages that elicited mysterious smiles, these little signs pointed to the unsettling possibility that Julian might be hiding something. On that fateful evening at Le Serine, Julian thought he would be safe. The renowned chef, Eric Reipert, was rumored to be in town, and the city's upper crust, including world-famous personalities, were rumored to frequent the restaurant. Little did Julian know that beneath Le Serine's sumptuous facade, a storm of suspicions and half-truths was about to erupt. Even more surprising, his pregnant wife had decided to book a private dinner at the very same establishment that night, determined to confirm or quell the haunting uncertainties in her mind. Le Serine was not just any restaurant. It was a temple of taste that combined the refinement of French cuisine with the edgy creativity of modern culinary trends. Soft golden lighting fell upon linen-draped tables, while the faint hush of whispered conversations intermingled with the polished sound of silverware sliding across porcelain plates. Julian arrived earlier than usual, accompanied by a leggy brunette in a sleek black dress that exposed just enough to spark curiosity. Camilla Hawthorne, an up-and-coming interior designer known to the design world's elite, had a reputation for capturing attention wherever she went. She was an unexpected fixture at the side of a married man whose pristine public reputation was built around loyalty and integrity. For months, Camilla had been riding high on the wave of her successes, a contract to redesign the lobbies of Julian's luxury hotels, followed by invitations to soirees and philanthropic events in which the Rothwell brand was a sponsor. Rumors swirled that Julian had personally recommended her to certain industry bigwigs, ensuring her career soared. That night, the hush-hush arrangement was to discuss design expansions for the new resorts, or so the official story went. Yet, the tension in Camilla's voice, coupled with the adoring gleam in her eyes, hinted that this late dinner was far from a straightforward business meeting. Julian tried to maintain an air of calm as they settled into a private booth near the back, away from the public gaze. Their table was adorned with fresh roses, and an overpriced vintage wine, chilled to a perfect temperature, sat within arm's reach. Every detail was arranged to create a sense of exclusivity and hush, something that on any other night might have gone unnoticed. Yet, unbeknownst to Julian, Serena had arrived at Le Serine a mere 10 minutes earlier. She was seated 2 tables away, hidden by an ornate partition, accompanied only by her childhood friend and loyal confidant, Margot Lefebvre. Margot was someone Serena trusted implicitly, a steadfast friend who flew in from Bordeaux upon hearing the trembling anxiety in Serena's voice. Although pregnant, Serena insisted on investigating the suspected affair on her own. Margot, out of concern for her friend's fragile state, had reluctantly agreed to accompany her. As Serena sipped water, wine was off the table for her these days, and forced herself to scan the menu. Her hands trembled. She half hoped to see nothing amiss. Maybe the swirl of suspicion and jealousy was all in her head. Then the staff quietly escorted Julian and Camilla through the restaurant. In that split second, the tiny cracks of doubt in Serena's world fissured into a chasm. She watched as her husband seated an elegant woman far younger than he, leaning in close to whisper something that made the woman laugh. The expression of complete adoration on Julian's face was something that Serena had not seen from him in a long time. The effect was shattering. A swirl of shock, anger, and heartbreak churned in her, making her breath hitch. Margot grabbed her hand under the table, alarmed that her worst fears had come true in a matter of seconds. Never in her life had Serena felt such anguish. She realized she couldn't simply jump out of her seat and confront them, not with the eyes of high society upon them. Above all, she knew that any public outburst could harm the child she carried, not to mention risk humiliating her entire family. Instead, she vowed to watch quietly, to piece the puzzle together, before deciding her next move. Little did she know that the next few hours would bring an explosive unraveling of truths that would shake every foundation upon which her life was built. Julian and Camilla, oblivious to being watched, allowed themselves the luxury of soft conversation peppered with flirtatious gestures. The wine in front of Camilla seemed to give her courage. Her laughter grew more carefree as the minutes ticked by, and Julian occasionally placed a hand over hers, a stolen touch that made both hearts flutter. Serena's table, though just steps away, felt like a different universe. Time moved painfully slowly for her. She dissected their every move, the arch of Camilla's eyebrow, the angle of Julian's leaning torso, and the dreamy tone of their hushed voices. Each detail weighed upon her heart like a boulder. It was beyond doubt Julian was deeply, intimately involved with this woman. Margot wanted to stand up and drag Serena out of that painful scene. She whispered, "You don't need to watch more." But Serena insisted on staying. Some part of her needed confirmation beyond measure, needed to face the betrayal head-on. No illusions, no half-truths. If her husband was truly seeing another woman while she carried his child, then there would be no more reason to cling to false hopes of marital bliss. Across the room, the restaurant's manager, clearly recognizing Julian Rothwell, approached the couple to personally ensure their comfort. Camilla, in her starry-eyed excitement, mentioned the possibility of traveling to one of Julian's new beach resorts in Hawaii. Julian's eyes flickered with a mixture of caution and delight. He motioned for secrecy, but the manager merely bowed away with a smile, used to overhearing delicate negotiations. None of them had any inkling that Serena was near enough to hear every syllable. In that moment, Serena's thoughts churned. Had Julian taken Camilla on secret getaways? Was this the first time, or one of many? The last time Serena and Julian had a vacation together was months ago, to Lake Como, when she was barely entering her second trimester. Even then, Julian had seemed distant, spending hours on the phone, explaining that an important investor named Alexander Pierce might be pulling out of a major real estate deal. She had accepted his excuses, gullible, or perhaps just wanting to believe that their marriage was beyond the petty heartbreak of an affair. At length, Camilla rose from her seat, presumably to visit the restroom. As she glided past the partition where Serena and Margot sat concealed, she accidentally locked eyes with Margot. For a second, Camilla froze. Recognition flickered. Camilla had briefly met Margot at an art gallery event a few months prior, introduced by none other than Julian Rothwell himself. A myriad of expressions crossed Camilla's face: confusion, then the realization of the predicament. Serena, hidden by the partition, prayed to remain unseen. Yet the damage was done. Camilla had recognized Margot, and soon she would piece together that Serena was near. Panic soared in Camilla's veins, and she dashed off to the restroom, heart pounding. A million scenarios hammered in her head. Should she warn Julian? Should she slip out quietly? Was the entire web of secrecy about to come crashing down in a very public way? Meanwhile, Margot locked eyes with Serena. Her grip tightened on her friend's hand as if to say, "Be ready. The confrontation is coming." Camilla stood before the restroom's gilded mirror, her heart racing. She dabbed a bit of cold water on her wrists, hoping it would quell the sudden wave of anxiety. Could it be that Serena was here, only a few feet away, separated by a thin wooden partition? The implications were staggering. If Serena had overheard even a fragment of their conversation, the entire facade that Julian meticulously built could unravel. She recalled the earlier days of her involvement with Julian. At first, she had dismissed the possibility of romance, focusing solely on the business side, her design projects, the brand collaborations, the philanthropic events. But the lines blurred when Julian offered her an all-expenses-paid trip to his ski lodge in Aspen under the guise of finalizing interior designs. One evening, a shared bottle of wine led to laughter, confessions, and ultimately an embrace that changed everything. Both had justified it as a moment of weakness, never to be repeated. But as days turned into weeks and the spark between them grew, they found themselves drawn deeper into an affair that demanded continuous layers of secrecy. Back at the table, Julian began to notice Camilla's protracted absence. Was she unwell or spooked? An uneasy feeling unsettled him. He recalled he had spotted a woman in a red dress earlier who, from behind, looked a lot like Margot Lefebvre, a name that spelled trouble if she was indeed here. Margot was fiercely loyal to Serena. If she was around, it likely meant Serena was also near. Within moments, Camilla returned, her eyes flickering with turmoil. She leaned close to Julian and whispered, "We need to leave now." "I just saw Margot." Julian's heart plummeted. He locked his jaw, trying not to draw attention from the surrounding tables. "Are you sure it was her?" he hissed back, scanning the room. He glimpsed the partition, the subtle shape of someone seated behind it, but the angle was too discreet. "If it's Margot, then Serena might be here," he concluded under his breath. Camilla nodded. The swirl of guilt, adrenaline and fear tangled in her stomach. They had been so careful avoiding public entanglements, booking dinners in private rooms, traveling incognito. Now, it seemed all of that caution was undone by sheer coincidence. Or was it fate? Before Julian could slip out quietly, the sommelier approached with their main course, presenting it with the flourishes typical of a Michelin star establishment. To leave abruptly would draw instant attention, especially from the staff accustomed to pampering elite clients. Julian, always measured, forced a smile, thanked the sommelier, and swiftly apologized to Camilla. "Let's at least pretend to eat, we can't storm out." Across the restaurant, Serena's chest tightened. The hush that enveloped Julian and Camilla felt like a vacuum, pulling her deeper into heartbreak. She recognized Julian's mannerisms, his subtle glances around the room, the twitch in his jaw that always gave him away when he was nervous. No matter how calmly he tried to handle the situation, she could sense his alarm. Margot whispered, "This is your last chance to leave quietly. Are you sure you want to do this?" Serena looked at her friend, tears threatening to break free. She shook her head. "I'm going to confront him. I won't let them slip away. Not after this." The finality in her tone was chilling. She might have tolerated half-hidden truths, but seeing the betrayal with her own eyes emboldened her to demand an explanation. The tension in the air was about to escalate into a confrontation that neither Julian nor Camilla could so easily dodge. Slowly, Serena stood from her seat. The trembling in her legs was overshadowed by the raging storm inside her. She placed a protective hand over her belly, acutely aware of the child she carried, an innocent life entangled in this emotional battlefield. Margot rose as well, poised to offer support if needed. Time seemed to slow as Serena walked around the partition, revealing her presence to Julian and Camilla. Her eyes were glassy with tears, her posture unyielding. Julian looked up mid-sentence, and his face drained of color at the sight of his pregnant wife standing before him. "Serena," he blurted, rising halfway from his chair. The single word carried shock, guilt, and 1,000 unspoken apologies. Camilla's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle a gasp. Nearby diners, sensing a sudden tension, turned to observe. Some recognized Julian's face from magazine covers. Others, aware of his philanthropic glamour, watched with mounting curiosity. Serena tried to speak, but at first, No words emerged. Her eyes flicked between Julian and Camilla. The discreet hush of the restaurant served as a stage for her heartbreak. She finally managed, "Are you going to introduce me to your guest?" A hush descended, thick enough to cut with a knife. Julian swallowed. "Serena, this isn't what it looks like," he began. The cliché nature of that defense only sharpened Serena's fury. She shook her head, anger blazing in her eyes. "Really? Because from where I was sitting, it looks exactly like you're having a cozy dinner with your mistress," she snapped, voice low but laced with venom. Her words cut through the quiet. Camilla pressed her lips together, tears of humiliation threatening to spill. She fidgeted with her napkin, her composure crumbling. Julian's mind whirled, scanning the room for a graceful exit strategy. "Let's talk about this somewhere private," he insisted. He reached out to grab Serena's arm, but she jerked it away. The movement unsettled her balance, and for a split second she feared for the safety of her unborn child. Margot stepped forward protectively, glaring at Julian. "Don't you dare," she hissed. She had always disliked him, despite his outward charm, and now her suspicions of his character were confirmed. The onlookers, including a couple of recognized faces from the city's social elite, gawked. Whispers spread from table to table. Camera phones were subtly angled, capturing the drama. Even the discreet staff began to panic, unsure how to contain a scandal involving one of their most prominent patrons. Summoning her courage, Serena found her voice. "I deserve an explanation." "Why, Julian? I gave up everything to be with you, my old life in France, my sense of independence. And now I'm carrying your child." Her voice quivered, but the determination remained. "Why would you do this to us?" Julian's eyes filled with regret. He glanced at Camilla, then back at Serena. The illusions he had woven of being the devoted husband, the philanthropic icon, and the unstoppable business mogul were unraveling in real time in front of an audience. Unable to meet Serena's gaze, he mumbled, "It's complicated. Complicated," Serena repeated, letting the word hang in the air. She sniffed, fighting tears. "You know what's complicated, Julian? Being pregnant, alone, thinking your husband is just busy, and then finding out there's another woman. That's complicated." Camilla finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Serena, I'm so sorry." "I never meant." Serena cut her off with a glare. "Save it," she spat. "You both made your choices." The raw pain in Serena's voice resonated, causing even some jaded onlookers to feel pangs of sympathy. Julian sensed the situation spiraling beyond control. He pleaded, "Let's go outside, talk this through, please." But Serena stood rooted, tears rolling down her cheeks. The facade of their perfect marriage was in shards, scattered across the immaculate floors of Le Serine. The hush that fell upon the restaurant was deafening. People were straining to catch every sentence, glimpsing the front-page drama unfolding in real time. Among the watchers were a few well-known paparazzi magnates, actors, socialites, and high-profile investors. Even Chef Eric Reipert, who had arrived earlier to consult with the head chef, was quietly peering from the kitchen entrance, though he wisely stayed out of sight. Trained staff tried to salvage the moment. The restaurant's manager rushed over to offer a private dining room, or perhaps to discreetly settle the check. Julian waved him off, his jaw clenched, focusing solely on Serena. His voice was hoarse with desperation. "Serena, you're trembling. Please, for the baby's sake, let's step outside. Let's talk." But Serena refused to move. Her heartbreak and anger demanded immediate release. She stared him down, her hands trembling, her mind flashing through countless memories, the wedding vow in that French chateau, the first time they held hands in a Parisian garden, the reassurance he gave her just last month about the future. Each recollection felt like a blade slicing her open. Margot, her friend, seemed torn between letting Serena confront Julian publicly and whisking her away from the humiliation. At last, she placed a gentle hand on Serena's shoulder. "He's not worth you collapsing here," Margot muttered in French. "Think of your health." The phrase, "think of your health," brought Serena back to reality. If only for a moment. She was 7 months pregnant after all. The stress was not only endangering her, but also her unborn child. Summoning what remained of her poise, she nodded stiffly. "Fine," she said, her voice cracking. "We'll talk outside." The trio, along with Margot trailing behind, moved through the restaurant. Whispers parted like a sea around them, and all Serena could think about was how many times she had walked into such a place on Julian's arm, proud to be Miss S. Rothwell. Now, she felt the stares of pity, the sting of betrayal plastered across her face. Stepping onto the sidewalk, a gust of cooler night air hit them. The paparazzi that occasionally lingered near upscale spots recognized an unfolding scandal and snapped into action. Cameras flashed. Reporters, alerted by social media posts from diners, rushed to the scene. Within moments, a small throng jostled for positions, shouting questions. "Mr. Rothwell, are you having an affair?" "Miss S. Rothwell, can you confirm the rumors?" It was chaos. Julian tried shielding Serena with his coat, a gesture that might have come off as protective if not for the circumstances. Camilla hovered nearby, her head bowed in shame and fear. Margot closed in protectively on Serena's other side, glaring at the paparazzi. She barked at them to back off, reminding them that Serena was pregnant. A hush fell over the crowd when Serena turned to Camilla, ignoring the cameras. "Do you love him?" she asked, voice raw. Camilla's eyes shimmered with tears. She couldn't speak. In the end, her silence was answer enough. Serena inhaled a shaky breath. "And you," she said, turning her gaze on Julian, "is this who you are now? A liar, or were you always that man, and I was just too blinded by love?" Julian stammered. I didn't intend for you to find out like this." His words were feeble, overshadowed by the relentless flash of cameras capturing his downfall. The timeline of events was out of his control, and the world was watching with bated breath. Under the relentless barrage of camera flashes, Julian's instincts as a high-profile businessman kicked in. He knew the value of spin control. It had saved him from countless corporate fiascos in the past. But this time, the fiasco was personal, laid bare in front of the entire city. His brand, the philanthropic, idealistic entrepreneur, was in shambles. The stock market might not open until the next morning, but he could practically hear the rumor mill churning, anticipating a potential dip in share prices for his ventures as scandal overshadowed success. Serena's eyes brimmed with tears, and her face showed the deep hurt that no PR statement could ever rectify. Every inch of her body tensed as the paparazzi barked invasive questions. Through the chaos, a black SUV with tinted windows screeched up to the curb, one of Julian's drivers. Presumably alerted by the restaurant staff about the commotion, Margot tugged on Serena's arm. "Let's go," she urged, shooting a withering glare at Julian. "You've caused enough pain tonight." Before Julian could protest, Margot led Serena to the waiting SUV. The vehicle sped off, leaving Camilla and Julian behind, swarmed by the press. Realizing the precariousness of the situation, Julian hastily ushered Camilla into another car that arrived a moment later. "We need to get you out of here," he muttered, ignoring her tear-streaked face. She looked at him with mingled guilt and yearning, but he averted his gaze, too consumed by the meltdown of his carefully guarded life to meet her eyes. Within minutes, they retreated, leaving a cluster of photographers and reporters behind on the sidewalk. The entire incident, captured by dozens of cell phone videos, was already on its way to going viral, thanks to social media postings from various patrons. By the time Julian and Camilla reached his penthouse, the first wave of scandalous headlines had started popping up online. Julian Rothwell caught with mistress pregnant wife confronts him at Le Serine. The Rothwell affair, A marriage in crisis, rich billionaire's double life exposed. Julian sank into his leather sofa, running both hands through his hair as he scanned the onslaught of notifications. He had PR people for crises like this, but could they contain the emotional wreckage? Camilla trembled, standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering skyline. She muttered, "I never wanted it to turn out like this. I swear." Julian let out a hollow laugh. And what did we expect? We were playing with fire. His mind whirled, trying to strategize the next steps. A statement? A press conference? Should he contact Serena directly or let the dust settle? One name floated repeatedly to the forefront of his mind: Alexander Pierce. An influential investor in Rothwell Holdings, Pierce was famously conservative regarding moral conduct. If Alexander caught wind of this scandal, and he undoubtedly would, there could be repercussions in business partnerships. Julian's entire empire was suddenly at risk because of his personal indiscretions. Camilla walked over to him, tears glittering in her eyes. She reached out a hand, but he pulled away. "I need time to think," he said curtly. "Maybe it's best if you go. I need to handle this alone." Her face crumpled. She nodded, grabbed her purse, and hesitated, as if hoping for a gesture of reassurance. But none came. With a trembling sigh, Camilla left, the door closing quietly behind her. Julian gazed at the city lights, each one a reminder of his achievements. Tonight, those achievements felt hollow. His wife, pregnant with his child, had discovered his darkest secret. In the process, he had humiliated them both on a public stage. For the first time in his life, Julian was unsure if his money, power, and charm could stitch together the havoc he had unleashed. Even before sunrise, the world had turned upside down for Serena. She was holed up in a suite at her friend Margot's boutique hotel, ironically one that Camilla had designed months earlier. The heartbreak carved into her face made her unrecognizable. News outlets blared the scandal on every platform: television, tabloids, social media. A knock at her door stirred her from her daze. Margot entered, carrying a tray of breakfast Serena likely wouldn't touch. "You need to eat something," Margot said softly. Serena only sighed, placing a protective hand over her belly. Everything else could wait, but her child needed nourishment. She scrolled through her phone in a numb haze, ignoring messages and calls from relatives, including her father, Pierre Delacroix, who was outraged by the news. Her mother, still in France, had left tearful voicemails pleading for Serena to return home. But Serena felt paralyzed. She didn't want to face pitying eyes or the wave of condemnation that came with a public betrayal. By noon, a new headache emerged, the swarm of paparazzi that had already discovered her hideout. Margot had posted an innocent photo of the hotel's lobby weeks ago, tagging Serena. Now, unscrupulous paparazzi pieced together the clue and descended in droves. The hotel staff tried to maintain privacy, but a few guests complained about the intrusive photographers, forcing Margot to double security. Meanwhile, across town, Julian's empire was bracing for impact. Stock shares for Rothwell Holdings dipped slightly, though not catastrophically. The tabloids buzzed with speculation about the possibility of a divorce and the mammoth settlement that might follow. In his corner office, Julian sat in an emergency meeting with his senior management team and his top PR strategist, Brenda Calloway. Brenda was a razor-sharp communications expert who had handled everything from corporate takeovers to philanthropic controversies for Julian. But a personal affair was new territory, particularly one so public. "We need a statement," she said, scanning Julian's haunted expression. "Silence will only fuel more rumors. We have to address the scandal head-on." "And say what?" Julian asked, steepling his fingers. The overhead lights felt unbearably bright. That I cheated on my pregnant wife and humiliated her in public? Brenda exhaled. We craft a message that doesn't confirm the details, but acknowledges a private matter that spilled into the public eye. We emphasize regret, respect for Serena's privacy, and a commitment to resolving personal issues away from the limelight. We also highlight the philanthropic commitments to shift the narrative away from scandal alone. Julian slumped in his chair. Part of him wanted to call Serena to beg for her forgiveness, but he knew she wouldn't pick up. She had every right to ignore him. The weight of his actions pressed on him like a choking vise. That evening, the official Rothwell Holdings press release went out. It read, Mr. Julian Rothwell confirms that a personal dispute occurred on March 8th at a private restaurant. He and his wife, Serena Rothwell, respectfully request privacy during this difficult time as they address personal matters. Rothwell Holdings remains committed to its philanthropic and business goals. No further comment will be provided at this time. Reactions were mixed. Some saw the statement as a sanitized cop-out, typical of wealthy men caught in scandals. Others sympathized with Serena, who had become a visible representation of heartbreak. Meanwhile, Camilla Hawthorne faced her own social backlash, with her design clientele suddenly wary of the public spectacle. In a single night, the reputations of 3 people lay in ruin, ignited by a single spark of betrayal. Days turned into a blur. News cycles churned out every conceivable angle of the affair, and the rumor mill spun wildly. Was Camilla pregnant too? Was Serena planning a rapid divorce to claim half of Julian's fortune? The speculation was relentless, fueling both legitimate journalism and trashy gossip. Within the Rothwell Holdings boardrooms, tension rose as Alexander Pierce's representatives demanded an internal review of the scandal's impact. Serena, meanwhile, remained cloistered at Margot's hotel suite, her emotional state fragile. She alternated between tearful breakdowns and moments of cold determination. Every time she felt the baby move, she whispered promises of protection. It was no longer just about Julian's betrayal. It was about safeguarding her unborn child from the chaos. Margot tried to coax her friend into confiding in family or at least returning to her own residence to avoid the paparazzi. Serena, they're not going to leave. They're camped outside the hotel. Maybe we should leave town or even the country? She hinted at taking Serena back to the Delacroix family estate in Bordeaux, far from the prying American press. But Serena refused, her eyes flaring with a quiet resolve. I'm not going to hide. I did nothing wrong. At the same time, Julian grew more desperate to speak with her. He called, texted, and even left notes with the hotel concierge, all of which went ignored. Guilt and regret gnawed at him. He recognized the shallow justifications he'd used to start and continue the affair. He thought, maybe I was craving novelty? Maybe I was stressed and found solace in someone else's arms? None of these excuses would fix what he had done. Alexander Pierce summoned Julian to a private meeting at his penthouse suite, a lavish space with marble floors and panoramic views of the city. Tall, imposing, and stern, Pierce wasted no time in niceties. This scandal jeopardizes our upcoming project, he said, referencing an ambitious real estate complex that aimed to blend luxury living with community development. Investors are cautious. Your moral reputation was part of the deal, Julian bristled. I can handle the personal crisis, he assured, though his tone lacked confidence. I just need some time. Pierce's gaze hardened. Time is money in our world. Clean up your mess or I walk away. We both know that would be disastrous. The ultimatum struck a nerve. Julian realized that if Pierce withdrew his investment, the ripple effect could topple multiple ventures and cost thousands of jobs. The philanthropic side of him cringed at such a domino effect, but the purely business side recognized the immediate threat to his empire. As if orchestrated by fate, the doorbell rang, and one of Pierce's assistants led Camilla into the suite. She looked pale, visibly shaken. "I had to come," she whispered, glancing nervously at Pierce. "I can't get in touch with you, Julian. You're always in meetings, and your assistant blocked my calls." Pierce grimaced at her presence, but he allowed the meeting to continue in his luxurious living room. Camilla explained that a tabloid journalist had approached her family, offering a significant sum for exclusive details. She was torn between protecting Julian and herself. The pressure was immense, both financial and emotional. Julian felt trapped. On one hand, continuing any association with Camilla risked further scandal. On the other, cutting her off might provoke her or push her into selling stories for revenge or financial survival. The complicated knots of betrayal were tighter than ever. That night, after a long day of stonewalling the press and placating anxious investors, Julian found himself standing outside Margot's boutique hotel. A cluster of paparazzi lingered by the main entrance. He opted instead for a side door, slipping the doorman a generous tip to let him in. Everything about him screamed exhaustion, dark circles under his eyes, a rigid posture born of tension and guilt. He took the elevator to Serena's floor, ignoring the incredulous stares of a few guests who recognized him. At last, he stood before her suite, uncertain if she'd even open the door. Mustering courage, he knocked quietly. Margot answered, her expression icy. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she said. But noticing the slump in Julian's shoulders and the bouquet of soft pink lilies in his hand, Serena's favorite Margot allowed him inside. She gestured for him to wait in the living area. "If she wants to talk to you, that's her choice," Margot muttered. She disappeared into the adjacent bedroom. For a few agonizing minutes, Julian stood alone, taking in the discreet, elegant furnishings. There were traces of Serena's presence, her perfume on a side table, a half-finished maternity book on the armchair. Guilt gnawed at him, a constant reminder of how he'd upended their life. Eventually, Serena emerged, wearing a loose-fitting maternity dress. She looked tired, yet her gaze was steeled with resolve. Margot hovered nearby, but Serena lifted a hand, indicating she wanted to talk to Julian alone. Reluctantly, Margot withdrew. An awkward silence filled the room. Julian carefully set the lilies down. "You look, well," he started lamely. Serena merely nodded. "Say what you need to say." "I'm not sure how much longer I can stand to look at you." He took a deep breath. "Serena, I'm sorry," he began. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I can't stand this, knowing how much I hurt you. I never wanted it to become." He trailed off, struggling to articulate the scope of his remorse. Tears gathered in Serena's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You betrayed me. While I'm pregnant. That's a cruelty I never thought you were capable of." She paused, inhaling shakily. "Was it just once, or was it months of sneaking around?" Julian grimaced. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It went on longer than it should have. The confession ripped through the final shreds of hope Serena harbored. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Thank you for your honesty, I guess," she said bitterly. She placed a protective hand over her belly. "Do you have any idea what it's like to feel your child move and wonder if the father even wants us anymore?" A pained expression crossed Julian's face. "I do want you. I do. I never intended to leave you. Camilla was." He rubbed his temples at a loss for words. "I wasn't looking for something else. It happened, but it's over now. You're the one I love, Serena." She laughed, a mirthless sound. "Love? You think an affair is how you express love?" She closed her eyes. "Maybe you're sorry you got caught," she said quietly. "Because this is humiliating not just for you, but for me, for our families." A long pause. He stood helplessly, tears pooling in his own eyes now. "Serena, I'm asking for a chance to make this right. I'm ready to do anything, counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. Her gaze bore into him, torn between fury and heartbreak. I don't know if it's possible to forgive this, she whispered. But for the sake of our child, I'm willing to consider hearing you out. Not tonight, though. I'm too angry, too hurt. Julian lowered his head. I understand. I'll respect your space. But please don't shut me out completely. If not for me, then for the baby. He hesitated a moment, then quietly left, the door closing behind him like a final exclamation point on the pain between them. In the following weeks, Serena struggled to find her footing. Paparazzi continued to hound her, though Margot managed to arrange private transportation whenever she had to step out for doctor's appointments. The stress weighed heavily on her, physically and emotionally. Amid her turmoil, she found unexpected solace in her unborn baby's movements, tiny flutters that reminded her she had a new life to protect. She began writing letters to her child in a small journal, describing her hopes, her fears, and her uncertainty about the future with Julian. Each word served as a form of therapy, helping her process the betrayal. Meanwhile, Julian attempted to extinguish the fires of scandal scorching his business interests. Alexander Pierce had offered him a dangerous ultimatum: rectify the scandal or watch vital investments vanish. The pressure to project an image of stability was immense. His PR strategist, Brenda Calloway, insisted that he appear publicly with Serena, even if just for a charity event, to quell rumors of an imminent divorce. But Serena refused any staged appearances. She agreed only to a private meeting with Pierce to discuss the philanthropic aspects of the real estate project. At that meeting, hosted in a discreet lounge of a five-star hotel, Pierce witnessed firsthand the tension between Julian and Serena. She barely looked at him. Her posture was stiff, as if she were enduring an unpleasant chore rather than cooperating with her husband's business. After the meeting, Serena confronted Pierce alone. I respect your investments, Mr. Pierce, and I understand you're worried about your money. But I won't be a prop for Julian's image. Pierce, momentarily taken aback by her forthrightness, nodded slowly. He apologized if his business concerns trivialized her personal suffering. He assured her that any project decisions would not overshadow the well-being of the Rothwell family. During this stressful period, Camilla vanished from the public eye, retreating to a family home in upstate New York. Whispers circulated that she was considering a tell-all interview to salvage her tarnished reputation, but so far, nothing materialized. Julian sometimes wondered if she was waiting for a better offer or a moment when she could cause maximum damage. Each day, Julian reached out to Serena, desperate for updates on her health, the baby, or any sign that she might be open to reconciliation. She responded with brief, impersonal texts, mainly regarding medical appointments or essential financial paperwork. It was clear she had no desire for personal dialogue beyond the bare necessities. In the 18th week after the scandal, Serena counted them like the passing of seasons. She felt her baby kick more strongly than ever. A wave of emotion overwhelmed her. She realized she couldn't live the rest of her life in limbo, perpetually avoiding public scrutiny, harboring resentments that might poison her child's upbringing. She decided it was time to make a crucial decision, either attempt to heal with Julian or seek a definitive separation. But the path to either choice was fraught with pitfalls: the unyielding paparazzi, the meddling corporate investors, and a mistress who could re-emerge at any moment to share her side of the story. Destiny had set a stage where love, betrayal, power, and innocence collided. Now, it was time to see how the pieces would be rearranged. On a sunny afternoon, Serena stood on the terrace of Margot's penthouse suite, absorbing the city skyline. She gently caressed her growing belly, pondering the choice she had to make. Each passing day brought her closer to her due date, and the baby's presence felt like both a ticking clock and a guiding compass. She considered the possibility of divorce. Her lawyers had outlined the steps she could take, from prenuptial clauses to custody arrangements. Financially, she wouldn't struggle. Her own inheritance was substantial, and child support from Julian would likely be massive. The bigger question was whether her heart could handle the permanent scar of cutting Julian off. Despite the betrayal, part of her still yearned for the man she once believed he was. That evening, she requested a quiet meeting at her OB/GYN's office, inviting Julian to join her. He arrived on time, wearing a reserved expression. In the examination room, Serena lay back for an ultrasound. Julian stood nearby, silent but watchful. When the image of their baby appeared on the monitor, tears welled in both their eyes. The doctor pointed out the heartbeat, the little limbs, the signs of a healthy pregnancy. For a moment, Serena and Julian locked eyes, sharing the wonder that overshadowed their animosity. Once the appointment ended, the doctor discreetly stepped out, leaving them alone with the ultrasound images. Serena broke the silence. "She's healthy. That's all that matters right now." Julian swallowed hard. "She?" he echoed, eyes softening. Serena nodded, placing the ultrasound prints gently into her purse. "Yes, a girl." Julian's voice wavered. I wish I could be here for every moment. I know I ruined that chance." He paused, inhaling the sterile scent of the medical room. "But if you'd let me, I want to be by your side as much as I can. Not for appearances, not for business. For us, for her." Serena studied his face. She noticed new lines of stress near his eyes, the faint shadow of a beard that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. "I'm not promising forgiveness. And I'm definitely not promising to forget," she said carefully. "But maybe I'm willing to take small steps. For her sake, if nothing else." Relief flooded Julian's features. "Thank you," he whispered. "Anything you need, financial support, medical bills, nursery preparations, I'm here." Their conversation felt like walking on eggshells, overshadowed by wounds still raw and unhealed. Nevertheless, it was progress. Outside, in the corridor, paparazzi snapped photos as they exited, but this time, Julian shielded Serena from the intrusive flashes, gently ushering her into the elevator. Instead of parting ways, they rode down together, enveloped in a tense hush that also held a glimmer of hope. Back at Margot's penthouse, Serena recounted the experience to her friend. "Seeing the baby on the screen, I felt something shift. Maybe it was the look on his face." Margot, ever protective, frowned slightly. "Just be careful. People can change momentarily under stress. Make sure his remorse is real and lasting." For the next few days, Serena allowed Julian to accompany her to baby-related appointments, pediatrician consultations, Lamez classes, and child safety workshops. Each shared activity was a tentative step toward rebuilding the shattered bridge, even as the memory of his betrayal lurked like a ghost in every corner. By the 8th month of her pregnancy, Serena managed to carve out a semblance of peace. She decided to move back into the Rothwell mansion, albeit in a separate wing from Julian's. The estate boasted expansive gardens and a personal security staff that could fend off the press. Margot supported the move reluctantly, but she understood Serena's need for space and privacy to prepare for childbirth. Julian greeted Serena at the entrance, overshadowed by the gilded arches of their opulent home. He carried her bag silently, a mixture of anticipation and guilt etched on his face. Their arrangement was clear. She wasn't returning as his doting wife. She was returning for the child's well-being. That line was drawn firmly. Despite the tension, they found small moments to reconnect. Over breakfast, Julian would inquire about her cravings, blueberry waffles, decaf cappuccinos, and arrange for them to be prepared. At night, he'd check in on her, offering a gentle goodnight, never crossing into her private suite without invitation. In parallel, Julian sought therapy for himself, recognizing the need to confront the reasons behind his affair. He also convinced Serena to join couples counseling, ensuring that if they were to remain in each other's orbits, they would at least do so with professional guidance. The sessions were painful, forcing them to dissect vulnerabilities and regrets. But they persevered, fueled by the impending arrival of their daughter. Meanwhile, the media slowly shifted its focus. A new scandal involving a Hollywood actress overshadowed the Rothwell affair, granting them some reprieve. Camilla stayed out of the spotlight, rumored to be traveling abroad. Whether she was truly gone or simply lying low, no one knew. But her absence allowed Serena and Julian the breathing room they desperately needed. As the due date approached, Serena woke one night to a sharp contraction. Pain shot through her midsection, and she clutched the bed sheets. She tried to steady her breath, recalling the Lamaze exercises. Another contraction hit, sharper than before. She reached for her phone and, without hesitation, dialed Julian. Within minutes, he was in her suite, wide-eyed and half-dressed in pajama pants and a t-shirt. "Hospital," she gasped. "Now." He sprang into action, helping her downstairs, instructing the staff to bring the car around. The drive was a blur of speeding lights and anxious whispers of reassurance. Upon arrival at the hospital, Serena was whisked into a private maternity suite. Julian held her hand through the worst of the labor pains, whispering repeated apologies between words of encouragement. Hours later, a tiny cry echoed in the room. The nurse placed a baby girl, wriggling and pink, into Serena's arms. Tears of relief, joy, and heartbreak poured from Serena's eyes. Julian gazed at their daughter, overwhelmed by a sense of awe and responsibility. She was perfect. A new life untainted by scandal or bitterness, a symbol of hope and a reminder of every consequence leading up to this moment. They named her Aurélie Rothwell, a name Serena had chosen for its French roots, meaning golden. In that hospital room, a fragile truce was forged between husband and wife. Their child was the golden thread that could stitch together a future, though the path ahead would be uncertain, marked by both possibility and the lingering shadows of what had been lost. The days following Aurélie's birth were a swirl of midnight feedings, soft lullabies, and cautious steps around unspoken resentments. In the warm glow of the nursery, painted in a gentle cream palette, Serena found herself smiling at life's tiny miracles, the way Aurélie's fingers clasped hers, the soft cooing that replaced the hush of heartbreak. Julian, for his part, was hands-on, changing diapers, preparing bottles, and marveling at his daughter's every facial expression. Counseling sessions continued. If anything, the arrival of Aurélie heightened the stakes. Each session forced them to confront the question, could they rebuild trust for the sake of their family? Or would the memories of betrayal forever stand as an impenetrable wall? The therapist pushed them to communicate openly, to share anxieties and regrets. Slowly, they unearthed the root causes: Julian's fear of stagnation, Serena's unvoiced insecurities, and a spiraling set of poor decisions that led to the affair. Serena still couldn't ignore the pang of pain whenever she recalled the night at Les Serines, but day by day she saw small shifts in Julian. He turned down night calls, refusing to leave home after 7 p.m. unless absolutely critical. He publicly rebuked gossip magazines that tried to profit off Aurélie's pictures. He even established a new charitable fund in Aurélie's name, focusing on maternal and child health clinics worldwide. Some called it a PR move, but Serena saw sincerity behind the gesture. Despite the glimmer of hope, rumors continued to swirl. The public was eager for an update. Would the Rothwells finalize a divorce or present a united front? Camilla remained a wild card, her silence both reassuring and ominous. Serena's father, Pierre Delacroix, pressed for a meeting to discuss the broader family ramifications. Your reputation matters, my dear, he reminded her over a phone call. Please ensure your child doesn't become fodder for more gossip. One evening, while Aurelie slept in the nursery, Serena found Julian in the study, gazing at an old photo of their wedding day. He looked up, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. "We were so happy," he murmured. "I ruined that." Serena stood beside him, arms folded. "We can't change what happened," she said softly, "but maybe we can decide what happens now." He turned to her, voice quivering. "Do you think there's a real chance for us?" It was an honest plea, stripped of arrogance or pretense. She hesitated, her mind replaying memories of both heartbreak and kindness. "Maybe," she said at last, "if we keep working at it. If we're both honest about our faults and our needs." He reached for her hand, and she allowed it, though the gesture was still tinged with uncertainty. In that quiet moment, they shared the gravity of what it meant to have a second chance knowing. It wouldn't erase the past, but it might carve out a new narrative. A tender, fragile peace settled between them, one that would require continuous effort to maintain. In the end, the story of Julian, Serena, and Camilla reminds us that even colossal wealth can't shield a person from the consequences of betrayal. Through heartbreak and scandal, Julian learned that true power isn't found in boardrooms or bank balances, it's in the bonds we forge with those we love. Serena discovered her own strength, refusing to let public judgment dictate her choices. And baby Aurelie became a beacon of hope, the promise that even shattered dreams can give birth to new beginnings. Thank you for watching and listening to this dramatic saga of love, betrayal, and fragile redemption. If you found yourself swept up in the twists and turns, please like this video, share it with anyone who loves a gripping real-life drama, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories filled with shock, intrigue, and heartfelt moments. Stay tuned, more captivating tales await.